All right. So Suzuki is really, it's a full circle moment for me and for our co-counsel and my trial partner, Gabe Houston. I worked with Gabe back when I was a clerk at one of the med mal firms that represented me for my wrong.
No.
Yeah. So I worked with Gabe, and I remember him giving me this huge stack of documents, and they were like all in Japanese. Some of them were translated.
Do you speak Japanese?
No. So I didn't really dig too deeply into those ones. But the other ones, he's like, I need you to go through and I need you to look if you see anything. I can't remember the exact term that he was looking for, but I'm assuming it was like brake failure. And we'll get there in a second. So I was looking through thousands of pages of documents. Okay. And then eventually Gabe left that firm. I went to law school and we kind of, went our separate ways, still stayed in touch. And Gabe took this Suzuki case with him when he left the firm.
Why were you looking at documents though?
I was just doing just document review, trying to find evidence that he could eventually use.
But you were at this point in time,
I was a clerk.
You were a clerk.
I wasn't even in law school. Yeah, at a firm that he was a associate at.
Okay. So, and he had this case, then he leaves the firm.
Takes the case with him.
Okay.
Okay, and then is working up this case, eventually partners with the Simon Law Group, and they join forces, and they try this case together. So he tries the case the first time with someone who used to work at SLG, and I would go watch. So I was in law school at the time, and I'd break away from class and I'd go take like a pen and paper. I'd take notes and I'd watch Gabe, in trial. I watched his closing. And I remember even meeting with jurors after this trial, and I had notes that I created, and I had a Word document that I saved in my iCloud that was like Soulier jury notes or something. Okay.
But this is a different case.
No, it's the same case.
Wow.
Yeah, we're getting there.
All right.
So they win this case all in. It's like, I think it was 8.9 million or 9 million. And then with, I think, cost and interest, it was like 10 or 11 million dollars. A good verdict.
Yeah.
Right? A really good verdict.
Of course.
So Suzuki appeals the case. The basis of the case is a front brake master cylinder that fails. Okay. And when that front brake master cylinder fails, it's in the use of motorcycles. And so riders are trying to pull this handle to utilize that brake. That front brake doesn't work, and there's crashes and crashes and crashes. So our client was one of those riders who went to go pull that brake, and there was no feedback, not the feedback he was expecting. And he ends up crashing and suffering a really horrific leg injury. So they try the case the first time, they win it, Suzuki appeals it. They win technically on one portion of the appeal, but the appellate court grants a new trial. So they have to try it a second time. So fast forward, that's 2018, 19. So fast forward to 2023. Yeah, 2023. I got my years mixed up. So beginning of 2023, Gabe Houston, who brought the case to Simon Law Group and, who's been working this case up and who was my trial partner, calls me and tells me a little bit about this. And I already knew what he was talking about because I'd worked on this case with him back in the day, right? And I'd watched him do his closing argument. And he just is kind of lightly poking at like my interest in potentially working with him on this case. And at this point, I've tried, 4 or 5 cases. I'm not like, I don't have 15, 20 trials under my belt. And I tell him, I'll do it. Like, you tell me you want me to do this with you, and I'll jump in head first. And I remember telling him, I don't have the experience that Bob has. I don't have the experience that Grayson has. But if you give me an opportunity to try this case, I will pour everything into this, and I will not let you down. Right? I will put every ounce of my being and my energy into this, and I'll give it everything I have. And I remember him saying like, okay. So Bob let me try this case with him.
So now you go and you're part of this team.
Yep.
And what happens?
I dive head first. It's Gabe and I talking every day. Travis Davis, a partner at my firm, was hugely important in the evidentiary issues and making sure that I understood what we needed to get done. So it was a whole team effort, right? It was Travis, it was Gabe, it was myself. We were the trial team. We start preparing. I remember I was like obsessed. Like my parents, my brother, they were dropping food off to my front doorstep because I
Aw.
didn't even want to take breaks. Like it was more intense than studying for the bar. Like I was stuck to a desk trying to learn everything that I could. And I had the responsibility to bring the client's story to life. So Gabe gave me all of damages. So we split. I had damages. He had liability. I think I put on like 8 or 9 witnesses in trial, including the client. So I had to get his story out there. And I really spent so much time with this client. And I'm a huge fan of Joey's. I think I'll always stay a friend to him and connected to him. But we would just go out for lunch. Like, and I'd tell him, I don't want to talk about the case. Like, let's just talk about life. Like, let's just tell me like how you got to where you're at. And I really tried to get to know this guy and really understand where he came from, what made him tick, what his passions were, who were the people closest to him in his life. And then I started putting those pieces together. And then I started to meet those people and I started to get their stories. And I think we just did such a great job of connecting his story to the jurors. I think that we did a really wonderful job of taking damages to just a different level. And we put on all of the damages witnesses before him, right? So we had his sister, we had his mom, his brother, his girlfriend, and they all spoke about him before. So by the time he gets up there on the stand, the jury is like, we're ready to meet Joey Souliere. Like, we want to meet this guy. And it was so powerful. It was so powerful.
And what did you guys do differently? And maybe this is part of it from the first trial versus the second trial.
I mean, Gabe had liability down and he knew it so well. There's nobody in the country that knew it better than him or that knows it better than him, frankly. So that really wasn't, I don't think, I mean, he was masterful with it. And I think that he picked apart their experts and did an incredible job when it was his time. But I think that was always the case. I think that happened in the first trial, which is why they had success in that first trial. I think the second trial was really about us trying to show who Joey Souliere was and why a jury should root for this guy. Because once you heard his story, there was really, I mean, it was incredible. That the way the jury kind of just embraced him and really rooted for him and got around him throughout that trial. You could see it. I mean, they just connected to him. And he's just such a genuine human being. I mean, you're either like, he's going to be honest with you, he's going to tell you how it is, and they love that about him.
I have another question.
Yeah.
What about all the notes you had taken from the first?
Oh, yes. That's a good question. So when I first find out that I'm trying this case, I something goes off in my head. I'm like, holy shit, I've got these notes that I saved. And to me, it's like, okay, like, did that happen for a reason? But I pull this document and I'm looking through all of my notes, and we ended up using like 2 of these notes were so important for us in the second trial. And I wrote that jurors in the first trial, they did not like that there wasn't enough clarity in explaining the difference between compensatory damages, the underlying damages for the client, and then punitive damages. They felt like when they awarded the first verdict in the first trial, because there's 2 phases, right? You have that first underlying case, then you have like a mini second trial for punitive damages.
And is it the same, excuse my ignorance, same jurors?
Same jurors, right? So that can be confusing if you're not really from jury selection all the way through. Every opportunity you have to explain, we're coming twice, right? We're going to be asking 2 different times for 2 separate things.
Wait, and I have a question regarding that. When you do that, when you have to ask 2 different times, do you say to them, forget about the first time, forget about the money that's already been awarded? Can you say that?
Well, yeah. I mean, you have to really differentiate between the 2 because they're very different asks.
Well,
they're
also,
completely different.
Okay, but hold on. But also because I feel like intuitive as a human, it's almost hard to forget that. It's like, well, maybe this is worth, independently, it's worth X, but let's subtract what we already gave them. Like, I feel like just intuitively as a human, you can't erase what's already there. So like, how do you maneuver? We dealt with one issue.
Yeah.
We're done with that.
Right.
This is a different issue.
That didn't happen in the first trial.
And did it happen in the second?
Yes.
Okay, so that's what you mean.
I pulled those notes.
That was a difference. Explaining that's what you mean.
Yeah.
I'm confused by it. So I could see how they would be confused by it.
So I'll walk you through.
Okay.
So first time, you have the first verdict, which is for Joey's injuries, right? To his leg, everything that he's gone through, his medical expenses, the pain and suffering.
No, I get it. I get what you mean now. I just didn't get what you could say or couldn't say to a juror to make it clear.
So in the
this
second,
is separate.
In the second trial, I was constantly, that was like one of the main things that I was focused on was, and really it was Gabe's job more than mine because he was in that space more than me. But every chance I had to remind him, hey, you've got to make this super clear. Like they have to know that this first ask is completely separate from punitive damages. Punitive damages are to punish and deter the bad actor from engaging in similar conduct in the future, right? You're trying to prevent that bad actor. It's a punishment, really, punitive damages. So they understood it 100% the second time. They understood like there's going to be a first ask and we're coming back the second day. If you allow us and you give us that green light, we're coming back the second day and we're asking for a lot more. Suzuki tried it like it was the first case. And we came into it, and this is something that we said.
It's a second chance.
The second time going into this, we kind of had some mantras, and one of them was like, "This is a whole new case. We're not trying this the same way that we tried it the first time." And we made major adjustments, and we tried it very differently than the first time. Even the way that we structured our witnesses, we put them, in order. We were really, really aware of everything in this trial. Not to say that they weren't in the first trial, but I think that we just knew, how to bring the story together in the most, in the most impactful way.
And where did you learn to do that?
Watching the first trial, understanding where the misses were in the first trial. And I think just thinking about like human beings. If you're really excited to meet someone and you hear 4 people tell you little stories about that person before you're going to meet them, and they're all really great stories about this person, how much more excited are you to eventually meet that person, right? Like if you're already like, these jurors are pulled into this courtroom, they know why they're there. They know that they've got, to decide this case on behalf of this guy versus Suzuki Motor Corporation. They understand that they're eventually going to meet this human being. And if you can put these stories together leading up to that testimony from the client, it just like consistently builds that anticipation. So when he walked into the courtroom, you could hear a pin drop. Like all eyes were on him. They were ready to meet this guy. They'd heard all of the most powerful stories from his life. So imagine, you're going to meet someone that you're really excited to meet and you have all these stories.
Is this like a known tactic?
This is something that we just kind of put together. I don't know. Maybe it's known. It works for us.
Is it something you're going to try to implement going forward?
Yeah, I think that I would try to structure it this way. And every case is different.
Right. And
right? But I think that it's a really powerful way to present your client. I think there's so much power in building that story and building that identity so that by the time your client gets up there, the jury's, they're ready. They want to hear the story. So we had the first verdict, which was $11 million for his compensatory damages, all of the pain and the suffering, the medical expenses, past and future, $11 million. And then we came back the second day, and it was like a very fast second little mini trial on the punitive aspect of the case, and that was $150 million in punitive damages. So all in was $161 million.
Was there something like that you guys discovered that they failed to do?
When you start pulling out these documents, you start to see these memos, and you start to see the inner dialogue in this company and what they knew, but that they weren't sharing, it's pretty bad. It's pretty bad.
Did you do any like big data or focus groups or anything like that?
We did a focus group. We did a focus group before this, which I think was I think that was where we had that aha moment of
Really?
yes, yeah. Because I remember
What happened?
we brought Joey in and we did a focus group with like 40, fake jurors, whatever you want to call them, and I remember like we put on his damages and we had him talk a lot about his damages. And the consensus from this group was it sounded as if he was complaining. It sounded like he was kind of just whining about his injuries. And he heard all of it because he's in the other room, right? So he's listening to the live feedback.
That must be so
and
tough.
I remember I ran in there. I'm like, don't let this impact you. And he was really good about it. He's like, listen, they don't know me. Like, they don't really know my story. He's like, I'm not, he's like, it sucks, but I'm not taking this to heart.
So the aha moment was, how do we make it so it doesn't sound like a complaint?
The aha moment was, how do we get all of this out there, but not through his voice? Which was, we have to pull this from the damages witnesses. We have to pull this from his sister, his mom, his brother, his girlfriend, right? It has to come from them. And so by the time he gets up there, they've already laid out all of the struggles, and we just took little pieces from each, but they were really, really powerful little stories that exemplified the struggle he had gone through after his crash. So he didn't have to do that. He didn't have to sit up there and share 5 stories talking about how shitty his life was, right? He could just come up, touch on it. And when he touched on it, they already knew what he was talking about.
Right.
Because they already heard the stories.
And I've heard other trial lawyers say this about friends and family being the ones to like tell.
Woe is me. Juries do not want to root for someone who's just feeling sorry for themselves or, feeling like their life has been shattered and they're never going to recover. Juries and human beings naturally want to fight for an underdog. They want to fight for someone who's trying to come back from something really tragic. So I feel like if you can frame your client that way and show how they're fighting back and how they're that underdog that's trying to make the best out of the challenge, people appreciate that. That's why Rocky's still a worldwide phenomenon.